So the goal today is to just narrow down on those 5 key takeaways that we wanna, write about. And identify some champions for the different sessions and talk about a timeline. I think, if we identify some sections, some people to work on each of the sessions, we could get it done, written by the end of the summer and hopefully have this submitted this year still. But I wanted also to bring up something that I didn't have the chance to talk about yesterday, which is some 5 key takeaways from a different workshop, just focused on the modeling side of things. So Gennady, if you want to say a few words about it.
Yeah, so this is a perspective paper that we published a few years ago as an outcome of a workshop that was sponsored by Euromarine Network in Europe. So we got together people who are, well, not just the pure modelers, but people who are working on sediment biogeochemistry and use models. And this is a result of discussion. So we did not have, let's say, a structure of what we come up with, but as a result of discussions, when we then realized we were talking about these 5 topics, where we need improvement of understanding of the basic processes, and with that improvement of understanding, we can also advance the models. So that means that in addition to talking about these 5 research priorities, we were talking also of importance of communication between modelers and different models, as well as observationalists, empirical scientists. So in that paper, in the conclusions, which are this methodological advice for advancement, it's all about effective communication.
Thank you.
And it's a very short paper, so you can read it very quickly.
Yeah, so just wanted to bring that up, that it's still, it's out there. There's some targeted points. How do I switch back to that? Yeah, just the next step over. So to talk a little bit, to come back to what we want to write about, I thought yesterday communications came up a lot in all the discussions, and just thinking of the human perspective of it, and why do we want, and like the stakeholders. I think that could be an introduction. So first identifying what are the stakeholders and what would they want out of, both observations and modeling. So what are some of the key variables, let's say, that we should focus on. Does this seem, I think first of all, does this seem like a good structure? Introduction, review of processes, stakeholders, human dimension, subscales and definitions, and 5 major challenges and opportunities, with some considerations for modeling and observations. Does anyone have any suggestions on that? I want this to be an open discussion. I don't want to just keep talking about it.
I guess I'm curious if the question of spatiotemporal scales and the differences in definitions are not major challenges and opportunities.
Well, I guess the way I thought about this is, the definitions and scales and temporal differences appear in all of the major challenges. So like it's a multiplication.
Would you think about maybe having a subsection in each of those major challenges about that topic?
Could be.
How big do we want to make this? That's another consideration for how much we want to add to this, so how much space we have. So I think David brought up yields as a possible journal to submit this to? What's the word limits? Does anyone know?
My vote in general is short and sweet. So it doesn't drag on and people will actually read it.
Yeah.
Like the writing process.
I think it's 2,000 words for a feature. 2,000?
Yeah, 2000.
Okay, so do we keep it as a different, separate, or do we put it together with challenges and opportunities?
I think I agree with Colin. This is getting us all on the same page is a major opportunity and challenge at the same time.
Um. So some of the, just thinking from my recollection of the discussions, trying to narrow down to 5. So one could be like framework for integration of observations and modeling, then we could talk about having people involved in the same project from the beginning, modelers and observationalists working together, including mesocosms and experiments, and some general guidelines for model comparison, so that to inform people what would be the best model. Does that seem too much like for just one? Inorganic, organic carbon dynamics, coupling, bottom boundary flow, biology, data synthesis.
Can you say it again? Sorry, can you say it again?
Or
Okay.
right on the board or somewhere in this document.
Okay, 5 major challenges and opportunities.
I don't. Like, right.
I can read a comment from Lisa while you're done.
Mhm.
She said it'd be great to connect this group to the Deep Ocean Observing Strategy, DOOS. She will share a flyer or QR code to everybody or to me on email, send it. The annual meeting is May 21st to 23rd online. And apparently Christina will be invited, to present, but everybody's invited to attend. And yep, we'll get that info on.
Yeah, it's a virtual meeting, don't have to plan to get out of your house for that. And it's really fun, I really recommend it. Last year, there was a whole session on cheap and deep, which is how do we get more, scaling up, basic measurements. It's, yeah. It's definitely a community we should be talking to.
And I have a comment from Christoph on the paper. It should not be restricted in space. For the position paper, 2,000 words, not enough for 5 major challenges and things.
So 3 challenges.
Frontiers paper had also limited to 1,000
2,000 words.
and 5 challenges.
Yeah, we're gonna have to be very concise if we want to make 5 challenges. Does anyone have any other suggestions for other papers, other journals that would be a good fit?
Well, I had also thought maybe AGU use,
Yeah, that's, I think yours is 2,000.
is it 2,000? Okay, yeah. Well, that's, yeah. I think 2,000 words regardless of where we publish it.
I think so, that's, yeah.
It's easier to manage.
We have 2 suggestions in the chat here for Earth's Future from Syra, and Lisa suggested Elementa.
Yeah, Earth's Future was on my radar as well. That might be a good option. I think they have a little bit more space. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's up to 4,000 words.
Would this be suitable for LNO letters? like nature geoscience, their reviews are up to several, I think, 3,000 words.
So
3,000
nature,
words.
all of the perspectives, anything that's not a science, you don't have the option of publishing open access. And I don't know about you guys, but that's a big no-no for me. If that's not even an option, and we want people to read this. And we want to put some emphasis on how to make this accessible globally.
Same person.
Alan, no, I don't have a lot of experience with that. Is that a good?
No,
Yeah,
it's also short.
Hmm?
It's pretty short. I forgot the exact word limit, but it's kind of in the range of GRL, around 2000 or something. But they do have these pieces about what is, I know this because we're just submitting one. So what is new about this? So there is a lot of clarification that goes to the editor before they screen it, and then they will consider it. I have not seen a perspective paper in Eleanor letters. They're usually like short, like GRL format. It's
Mhm.
short, quick, rapid communication.
No, I've seen stuff. I mean, you guys published one on, I'm pointing at Wally there, on denitrification and permeable sediments, as I recall, which was. So, yeah.
There is also
Yeah, I'm looking at.
I'm seeing 3,000.
Is the journal Biogeosciences also, it's open access with open access review. And I was checking the manuscript types that they have. They have reviews and synthesis manuscript type with no specified length limit. But I just checked a paper published in this category and it seems quite long with 11 figures. Even more, 12. So yeah, I think it's the kind of paper was they encourage some kind of state of the art of knowledge with strong opening, so where we could describe future direction for our field.
Mhm.
And that would allow a lot of co-authors and a lot of figures and quite a lot of text, apparently. While being open access all the way, even the review. So that could be an option.
Biogeosciences. I'm gonna put all those suggestions here, but that seems like a great suggestion. And then we can think about it a little more, on the discussion and see what would fit and where we end up. Perhaps. Okay, so major challenges and opportunities. So guidelines for integrating modeling and observations. Adding biology to sediment models.
Yeah, I think with some of these I mean, I'm looking at the bio and biogeochemistry, and I'm thinking. A lot of that is, I mean, I'm probably gonna piss people off, but it seems like a lot of the same old, same old. And I think what I would like to see is. What are we really missing? What is really gonna push things forward? Because you can always say we need to know more about animals and sediments. I mean, seems to me, it's like a motherhood and apple pie sort of thing. So I would really like to sort of try to focus on something that's really cutting edge, important, cross-disciplinary.
Sarah, do you want to mute?
Yeah, I'm brainstorming here, so take or leave this. As an organizational framework, I wonder if among those points, among those 5, we could have a detailed oriented, like like a reductionist sort of what are the key informational gaps where something like iron cycling and iron fluxes have come up. And then a separate one for the upscaling, right? So a downward looking and an upward looking. What are the details in terms of the processes that we're missing? And then what are the what are the scaling issues that we have? There was two separate points that could encompass many things within those, as an idea.
I'll just say that I think that's a great idea for a format to, reduction is to get what some of the nitty gritty details that we're missing, and then big picture. What's the big story that we want people to take away from this?
And that would include the scaling up and down.
Yeah.
That's
So I guess we're gonna have like a big picture of, I don't know, cycling or a way we do modeling observation, feeding to each other. And then around that cycle, we do 5 major points, and each of those points we can look down to specific processes that we need.
Sam said, like you said, like maybe under each big challenge, we need to discuss the motivation and the why now. And within the why now, what innovations exist and why it's important to address now.
So the scaling up and down, the way I'm thinking about this now is just using the mesocosms and as a test bed for a lot of things, and then like for process understanding, and then using that understanding to maybe choose some locations of interest. And to making the point Sam made yesterday of, why not make course standard practice for cruises as well. That would be the scaling up, right? So scaling down, we get this mesocosms, we have this understanding, we have this framework of observationalists and modelers working together on this process understanding. We have the choosing of locations that would be of interest based on how they're responding to different perturbations. And then some recommendations for scaling up measurements in places. Oh, Nick.
So maybe that section, instead of thinking the section just on mesocosms, we'll put a section like, how do we get to this most quickly? Right, and how do we get to a good model quickly? And then it's like multiple paths, it's mesocosms, building models with existing data and looking for weaknesses, having people synthesizing existing data, that's all in one section, right?
Right.
Like a nice conceptual figure there. Because all these things can be happening.
Jeremy, do you want to mute?
Yeah, this is a half-baked idea that is pretty trivial. I could have just written it in there, but with this upscaling idea, I wonder if there's something we could learn from terrestrial ecology, terrestrial science, of, like, how do you think about upscaling? How do you do it? Because that's a place where maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a little more mature, the idea of taking a bunch of measurements across the landscape and scaling them up. Maybe we haven't had the chance to do it as much. I don't know. And I should say that would just be maybe a point in the introduction that we might want to make to do some contrasting.
I think the first thing in this article should be a really simple statement of the problem. What is the problem we're trying to address? And to me, that's, a mismatch between process-based measurements and what's needed for Earth system models. So it's sort of like, what's the purpose of this workshop? And then we can talk about what our ideas are for solving those problems or addressing those problems anyway. But until I came to this workshop, I didn't really realize it was such a big problem.
Mismatch process-based study.
Could I repeat that? That we need a statement of what the problem is. And to me, that is, there's a mismatch between process-based observations and process-based measurements and Earth system model for the benthic component of Earth system model. And the purpose of this workshop was to try to, identify those specific problems and make recommendations for addressing those problems.
Christina?
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just have a word on that? I think the idea of upscaling and downscaling is appealing, and it's probably very interesting. It reaches back to the question we raised about the space and time scales. But I think it does not cover all the points that we raised in the former discussions, like the one of the interaction between the organic and inorganic form of carbon. And I think we should not so much overlook these two. So we should not, well, we can try to put them all in the same framework, or we can have that question of scales somehow that is upscaling, downscaling kind on the one hand, and have also separate issues that we think are important separated from that. So that I would be in favor of that myself. Having the different points that we raised previously that you had in your challenges, to be, well, we try to dig on that in the position paper. Yeah.
So perhaps downscaling as one topic, upscaling as a different one, and then some more major challenges.
It could be, and also one thing that we also would like to relate to probably in that workshop is also the link to the changing climate or the changing atmosphere, or all these problems linked to the changing PCO2 in the atmosphere. So including this acidification, hence the question of the interaction with carbonate, or the changing of the weather patterns, and all these disruptive events that occur in the coastal ocean, but not only in the coastal ocean, also on the slopes and deeper parts of the ocean. So the warming, the deoxygenation, that kind of stuff. So we should relate at some point our position paper also to this scale. And
Sorry, Lisa.
I
I
wasn't-
see that as our, as the same point that Jay was making, that we're not predicting that, right? Like, do we have all these projections, all this, where's the world going? And all these studies are completely ignoring benthic processes because they're not included, right? So wouldn't that be just our motivation introduction? Let's let Lisa.
Oh, sure, go on.
So sort of picking up on that, if you take a step back and think about your writing to an audience that doesn't necessarily work on the bottom, I would suggest, especially for Earth system models, identifying examples of settings and situations where incorporating the benthos would make a difference to the large scale models, and how, and also identifying maybe some cases where the bottom or activities or situations where the bottom itself is central to decision making. In other words, all the questions are on the bottom, but even for when the questions are about what's happening to the whole ocean, I think not everybody would be able to tell you where the bottom matters, and what they're losing by not having the bottom in the models. So I think we should home in on on some specific examples of how and where it matters.
So when Sarah first mentioned scaling, I didn't think of it as much as upscaling and downscaling of size or temporal scales, but thinking of scaling as concepts. So with the 5 major challenge opportunities, there's a couple of things down there about carbon system and metabolism and stuff like that. I thought about what are the overall questions we have? Like, what's the big picture, and how do we scale that down into what are the specific things we have to look at or answer or address or measure or better constrain to be able to achieve those goals of representing them in a model? Just a different perspective on thinking scaling, not quite so literally per se.
Yeah, I agree. Like all the challenges have different versions in different scales, right? You need to address them in all possible scales.
Matt?
I've been thinking about something, which is a challenge that I had being at Woods Hole Oceanographic, and I think that, sort of, there's a structural impediment here in sort of traditional oceanography, because traditional oceanography is ship-based, track-based. You go to a station for a very short period of time, and then you move on because the ocean moves, right? But now we're talking about something that doesn't necessarily move relative to the oceans. And benthic observations don't lend themselves well to a CTD transect at a site. And I think there's this sort of structural impediment where, you know, I have colleagues that, you know, 6 of them go together on a cruise, and, you know, I try and figure out how I fit in there, and it just doesn't work because I need to either go to a site, drop something off and come back, or I need to stay there for a longer period of time. And there's sort of this disconnect, in my opinion, in the traditional way that we do oceanography that really doesn't work for benthic observations.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I wonder if we can put somewhere in here, like, there's so much work and energy right now about water column, like ROVs, and I mean, I've been on a cruise that did CTD, like traditional oceanography, benthic stuff, and ROVs, and it was admittedly quite difficult, because like the ROV people have to go and pick up their thing, and it's kind of a mess, but like, I feel like that's sort of where we're going, and if we can start thinking about the sediments maybe more in this sort of like, how do we improve the technology to make like continuous observations or observations in one point. But I also wanted to say, in terms of the 5 challenges, I wonder if it makes sense to separate out the scientific challenges, like what are this, like quantifying bioturbation, like that's like a science, we need studies, and you know, like that's a scientific challenge. And then there are these sort of like structural or methodological or like planning challenges. And it seems like, I don't know, we could either have that be, you know, one challenge is like exactly what Matt just said, or you know, something about how it's difficult to sample the seafloor, or like the terrestrial is so much more advanced because you can just walk to the next field and, you know, put something there, but the ocean is really hard to get to, especially the deep sea. So anyway, I just wonder, I'm not sure exactly how we want to do it, but it might make sense to pull out the scientific unknowns from the like logistical challenges.
I mean, we almost need like a geotraces for.
Yeah, yeah, and that's come up several times.
Because like, when you put a program like geotraces together, you get a whole bunch of scientists in one place doing the same thing. And just naturally, you pull in modelers because you have all of this data from all of these different groups, which you can then begin to lend very well to modeling. Then you have that modeling input on the front end where they're saying, you know, oh, it'd be great if we could have measurements here because of this. But I feel like so much benthic work is so patchwork individual groups. We could almost need like a larger structural program to
I've been
enable.
saying that for years. And every time I go to a geotraces meeting, you know, the 3 benthic people that are there are all nodding their head saying we need to do this, and then geotraces goes off and just collects water.
And same, yeah, I went to the biogeoscapes meeting, which seems like it's kind of the latest big program, and we talked, like, I was virtual and we were in breakout groups, and everyone, maybe it was because I was there, but we talked about sediments. Sediments are so important. And then at the end, they had a document with all the important things, and sediments were nowhere to be found. So it was kind of, I feel like we kind of need to do it ourselves.
No,
like, we need to
yeah.
be like, okay, you're not gonna, you know,
Yeah.
we need to have our own
Yeah,
program.
that was my take home from the Antarctic geotraces program, that but that's a different issue.
Colleen?
I will mention that I believe BioGeoscapes was funded by NSF XLNet, and that funding call comes out once per year. I think the next one is August or something like that. So like, if this is something we really want, we can work on writing that proposal.
And I would also argue to start focusing, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, on the margins first. Since that's where so much of the action is happening in terms of permanent production, fisheries, and that benefit pelagic coupling, like Lisa mentioned, so where does it matter? Where will it make a big difference before then maybe moving up to the.
And it's more
Open it.
accessible.
And it's more, that's exactly the other point. It's more accessible. It's easier to core, take more cores on the margin and, well, maybe not the
Yeah, 'cause
slope, but margin and slope than in the deep ocean.
The way I'm seeing this, I'm a modeler, but like, is that we need to scale up, we need more measurements that needs to be done. But we also, before that, we need to do some synthesis and understand some processes, because we also don't want to put out all this effort and miss something that would be a big, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I was just a couple of things. One is, I thought Lisa's comments were really great, and I think that that's gonna be something that's gonna be necessary in the beginning. Why does the bottom matter? Because that, and once we've established that, then we can go into more detail. The other thing I was thinking about was when Jay had this notion about the mismatch between process-based observations and Earth system models. I think that's certainly true, but the other thing I was thinking, we talked about this in one of the breakout rooms, is for people that do sediment modeling, or at least maybe the kind of sediment modeling I do, we really want to get all the processes right. And the question then becomes, how do you scale up the sediment modeling that sediment modelers kind of do to incorporate it into an Earth system model? And I think somebody's talk yesterday talked about different ways you could do that. And so it's not only the mismatch between the process-based observations and the Earth system models, but it's a question of how do you act, how much detail do you need about the benthic carbon cycle to go into an Earth system model to get it as right as you feel you can get it. And I think Samantha's comments that she typed in there sort of get at that as well. So I think, and that comes back to the synthesis too, as well, because that points out what we don't know for the next round of whether it's model development or field observations.
And how much uncertainty are we comfortable with? Because if you have a high resolution model that's solving for the coast, the type of model you need to get wetting, drying, and solve for coastal environments, that's a very specific model. And that is not gonna be in an Earth system model anytime soon. There's some efforts to include mangroves, for example, that I've seen. It's like very, very new, like nothing that's tested, but kind of what I think is if you're gonna have a high resolution, you're gonna solve for all these coastal processes. Great, you understand it. Is there some parameterization we can add as a lateral flux when you scale that up to a 1 degree? Because the 1 degree model is not gonna solve coastal environments. Period. Right, with the understanding we have, or if it does, that's an overkill for the deep ocean. So I think that balancing for now is about developing better parameterizations for what we can do. What can we include as a flux under certain circumstances that's not necessarily linked to the benthic model itself. Just spitballing, people feel free to tell me if I'm wildly wrong here.
No, that's
I have one thought, it's like, do we have any idea of like for example, just picking on that particular, the wetting and drying of the salt marsh matters? Like, it might matter for that particular salt marsh, but does it matter regionally, or like, is there a way for us to sort of,
I think that
determine that out?
Empirical model is just the seaward.
And that's the thing, I think there's a lot that we're like, does it matter globally, does this need to be included, so like, that's why my thinking is that first of all, we need a synthesis. Before we go off on, you know, priorities.
But like a synthesis. Yeah, can you be more like on the synthesis? So we talked yesterday about like coastal and open ocean, we could maybe synthesize those data to see if we can figure out the definitions. Is there an empirical way to figure out definitions for the open ocean? But for what else are you thinking about?
So a lot of what came up in discussions is like, can we get like simple relationships, right? Oxygen versus something that tells us something. And the thing is, maybe people figured out some of them don't work and those that didn't get published. So we're gonna be reinventing the wheel here every time someone wants to find new ones. But that might be a first way to get to it. Sam, do you wanna unmute?
Sure, I guess I wasn't that, it's not, it's related to a comment before, so I'm not sure if it's relevant anymore, but just in terms of the Earth system model, kind of when, needing to develop parameterization for 1 degree, I think that the Earth system model kind of world is moving more and more towards having the regional models embedded within. And so, or, in some cases, telescoping into the coast. And so I'm not sure that the developing the parameterizations for the 1 degree is going to be as, it's going to be, I see the trend going more and more, getting higher resolution, and resolving the coasts more and more. And so I guess I'm thinking about it like in that space, as we continue to do that, as we continue to develop these high resolution tools and capacity to simulate the coasts, and include them, on these longer timescales, then that connection becomes stronger and more important to resolve the benthos, Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree that's where a lot of the effort is going. I just wonder, because at some point if you narrow down too much, like you're talking about different physics, about different processes, right? So there is this idea of just increasing resolution towards the coast, but like how fine can that go without compromising? How long can you run it? Or some of the problems like wetting, drying, is that important or not? Because that's not going to be included in any of those models. So I think the way I'm thinking about it is just like figuring out whether that's important to begin with. Like what coastal processes are important to begin with.
I think coming back to the synthesis idea also for the significance of different processes in our model and observation work, I think that's a good idea to organize our efforts, right? So you have the needs for synthesis within modeling communities. So that speaks to the need of modeling intercomparison programs and also hypothetical modelings to play out how important certain processes are. And then we have synthesis in the data observationalist communities for data management, collaborative data collections, and just simply going out there, see what's already available in data space. And that's how I think about synthesis, right? 1, you can gather existing knowledge. 2 is into comparison between different programs, modeling programs, and hypothetical modeling, just for the sake of finding out importance of different things. And then we can go from there, talk about development of models, what process to include, and what observation to make in the future. I think, I don't know, I feel like that's a good way to organize our challenges and asks.
Going about this in a very different way. So the challenges are different based on the setting we're looking at. So can we have like sections based on, let's say, estuaries, coastal, deep ocean, and then have the challenges defined for each of these regions? Because they are going to be different, like coastal has way more data than deep, but maybe it's just oxygen data. And our challenge there is just oxygen data enough? Whereas in deep ocean, we don't have enough data to begin with. So the challenges can be different based on which part of the ocean we are looking at.
So like a breakdown in each section.
Breakdown, yeah, like 3 sections, okay, these are the challenges for this area, and this area.
Or you
Look at
could
the
have,
5 major challenges.
well, you can have a general challenge and then break
Right.
down, okay, this is what it means for coastal regions.
Right, yeah,
In terms of including biology.
right.
That kind of dovetails nicely with what Sam was saying, right? Because you
Yeah.
have global scale models, regional scale models nested with local small scale hydrodynamic models.
Mhm.
I was just gonna say that it seems like, so one of the things we did with that, we have an LO letters paper, it's that perspective paper on nitrogen fixation. And it's essentially our proposal that got funded to do an RCN on nitrogen fixation. In inland coastal waters. And one thing that we could think about as we're doing this is that something like this could be like our outline for something like an RCN proposal, which doesn't provide a ton of money, but you can get money for participant support and travel by postdoc. And then that could be like the synthesis part of this would be an RCN focused on synthesizing data and models and doing those comparisons, which would then could set us up for like the next big proposal and Excel net or needs a possible proposals. But it would provide, funding and opportunities to get together and actually do this. We had a research coordination that works. Those proposals are accepted anytime. So literally, as we're writing this, I guess I'm saying, this might, we could think about this as being like, 2 birds with 1 stone.
So 5 major challenges: coastal, shelf, open ocean. Slope. Slope.
Put it in shelf.
What do we do about the slope? Because I think that's one thing that came up, right? We don't know.
We could put a big question mark on it.
Slope, we don't know.
I think actually that's a good question to ask, at the same time to ask for how to say, to draw attention, because usually models, we have boundaries on the slope, and then we need all those fluxes and boundary conditions, but slope is so hard to get data on. Right, so that's like a challenge.
For the
that we
technical
have.
models, yeah. Yeah, I initially had thought about that as on like, what are some major places we need as a challenge? Christoph?
Yeah, I don't know if I got that correctly from here, but if you think of the 4 main challenges being the 4 main regions in the ocean, well, maybe I misunderstood what you were saying, but I think it's interesting to go into the challenges, like let's say the interaction between organic and inorganic, let's say, and develop that over the different regions. Of course, it would be different for the deep and the coastal, for example. Also, the relation of the animals to the geochemistry, let's say, in a general broad sense. But the intensity would be different. The relation would be different for each sub-region of the ocean. But I think we should definitely not cut our position paper into the different zones of the ocean, the deep versus the coastal or the slope. But we could divide each important topic that we target regarding to these different zones. That's what I would do personally, but not going into 4 subsections related to coastal, slope, deep, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's what we
I
talked
think
about.
that's,
Yeah,
yeah, because that provides the continuity of the problem and like some specific challenges, right?
Okay, I think that's good. Yeah.
Lisa, you're on mute?
Yeah. So one of the things that's worth calling out about the slope, because I do most of my work on the slope, is the really strong gradients in temperature, oxygen, pressure, and so on. And when it comes to modeling, for example, climate projections and so on, the steep slope makes the 1 degree seriously problematic. I mean, it covers a huge range of environmental conditions, and even downscaling, it's really hard to capture the very dramatic changes that happen across oxygen gradients or temperature or light gradients, you know, along the slope. So I think it's just, I'm not sure what to do about it, but calling it out as one of the challenges of incorporating the slope where so much carbon sequestration happens and so many other important processes happen, I think it's worth doing. Not necessarily having a whole separate section on it, but making that point.
I think that's a good idea, because if we break down each problem into regions, then how do we summarize up into, you know, really building a continuum? Because each section will be talking about, you know, problems in that area. So maybe after each breakdown section, we'll have a summary for that problem. How do we connect things? And then slope can come up in that paragraph or at the end of each problem.
Yeah, some special. Cause yeah, I mean, just thinking how the slope would fit in and a lot of the things that we've been calling out, right? It's like bottom boundary layer physics, iron transport. It does deserve some special attention, Nick.
Yeah, so this section of like challenges and opportunities, I feel like we're just dropping every single possible challenge in. I wonder if maybe thinking about this section as more of like steps to reduce key uncertainties might be a valuable choice, and like every challenge we pose, we should have clear steps to address that. And especially if this is a perspective piece instead of a review.
Right.
I think that's like kind of going to be a key thing to do. And I wonder if that might also help us kind of push things in an interesting direction.
One idea with this coastal shelf slope heap, like that lends itself really well to conceptual figures. So maybe we take that sort of regional section and we apply that to some conceptual figures where we can kind of list the major challenges and then go back to our main 5 things as sort of the core of what we're doing, because that transition from coastal to deep, everybody knows, right? So that's not a huge contribution. So I think it lends it well to separating out some of the main problems, but I think we go back to sort of our core ideas, like you were saying, with the challenges and opportunities as being sort of the main focus of what we put together.
Yeah, and when I say I wanted people to champion different sessions, that includes a figure as well, so. We need, I think it's worth having a team focused on trying to figure out how to.
Just trying to integrate all of the discussions that are going on. I think that dividing challenges based on coastal, ocean, and slope. The issue here is that we are doing this division, while maybe we should think about integration. Otherwise, we are kind of subdividing ourselves into groups of interests rather than coming together. And the same issue is about presenting 5 scientific challenges, because we are limited by 5, and there are much more, so we have to prioritize and leave something out. So I'm thinking whether, based on this discussion, to take a step away from that, or look from bigger distance, and instead of looking at what we can do or should do, but why we need to do that and how we do that. So I came up here with a list, so don't like, if you don't like it, don't take it forward. But one first question was that Lisa mentioned is why Bentos matters, because if we want to position our paper in front of other scientists or society who don't deal with Bentos, they need to understand why it's important. So, and that is a challenge in itself to explain why Bentos plays this important role. And then the areas that can integrate the efforts. So one of them was integration of modeling and observations. So how do we do that? What do we propose? Another one is mechanistic understanding, where we can talk about measurements and data availability as well. So it's a whole area, is how to advance this understanding. Another one is talking about time and space scales, where we can talk about coastal, offshore, because we have to approach them with different time and scale dynamics, and it naturally includes also how to go from process understanding at the local scale to larger scale and Earth system models. And then we have space for one more, which is, I think it's important to say why advancement of understanding in vent loss and sediments is important for society and the pressures on the environment. And all of this CDR, climate change, low carbon, and so on. So why do we need to do all of this science at all of these different scales and approaches? Why is it important for the society?
I agree 100% with that approach. I think if we put a laundry list of specific questions about sulfur cycling and carbon cycling and, you know, nitrogen cycling, I mean, you know, all of those are sort of losing the main point of this workshop. And that is what, you know, how do we approach this issue? Not so much what are the very specific questions, because to me, it just turns out being a laundry list of whatever was popular at this meeting and not necessarily what's really needed. So I totally agree with a different sort of philosophical approach to the paper.
I think Lisa's paper that she shared yesterday or the day before about, you know, the benthos being the ultimate receiver of all of the impacts of any sort of climate mitigation or deep sea mining, all of that provides the ultimate basis for why we need to understand this part of the ocean better.
Gabe?
Thank you. Sorry to be virtual. We lost power, and so I'm regretting my decision. But my sort of perspective on this is there something actionable that we can do? Are there certain metrics that dictate the spatial and temporal scales of each of these regions? Because if we can have more of a continuous approach, using like quantitative variables to describe, you know, these spatial scales, then we can all go back and we have our marching orders as to, you know, what do we need to synthesize and how much, what the scales are we need to synthesize to sort of inform the modeling, to then inform the observation. I don't know the answer to these questions, but thought that was actionable.
One way to identify scales is with power spectrum, and that works for both space and time. I don't know if we have enough data to do that or enough modeling, but that would identify specific spatiotemporal scales.
Yeah, whether we have data, that's a big issue for them.
Yeah, that's also, you know, some kind of analysis rather than just writing a perspectives paper.
I just want to put our attention back to the idea that was proposed a second ago, to have like a framework instead of listing the challenges. But I don't think we don't necessarily need to get rid of all the challenges we listed the past 2 days.
I think they could be examples.
Could be examples, and we can have a bigger structure that organize those things. Okay.
I think the idea of zooming out and seeing the challenges are things are so general, like we need a mechanistic understanding. We need to explain why we want to split the benthos. To me, dilute the message. I don't see anybody saying we don't need a mechanistic understanding. We all agree on this. And the risk in having things that are just so broad, I'm worried that it just reduces the interest to reading us to do it. It's really diluted. And I don't think the list of challenges that we have now is a laundry resource. So we try to combine things together. So I would rather have more a process-based group challenges on maybe not a certain element, but a group of processes that would then be subdivided into different regions, and so we can delve as deep as we want in those categories. But yeah, having 5 major challenges that are just so broad and blurry, it seems not really efficient as a way to communicate a clear message to the audience.
I think a good framework, sorry.
Charlie, you could put that bigger framework in the introduction. And say, here are broadly what we all need, and this is not something new. And then go into the specifics, because I do agree with you. It's like, well, okay, I'm reading this paper, but then what can I do after I've read the paper myself, when I go out to my study site, that would then help advance this coupling or this better coupling between observation and model. So I guess I see both sides where saying that it's not new, like including animals and like what David was saying earlier, that's, I don't know. It's not actionable. It's too big. Like, what do I measure? How do I take my core? What do you need? You need pH, you need sedimentation rate, you need oxygen for sure, and nitrate. That's at least what my modeling friends tell me. Yeah, for a 1D model.
Yeah, that's what we tried yesterday on talking on stakeholders. It's like, what would they want out of this model, right? Fisheries, what the fisheries people want out of the model. Aquaculture, so yes, they want bottom and off, yeah.
Is that too much for one paper? Like, who is the audience for this paper? Is this paper, are we trying to sell the benthos to stakeholders? Are we trying to sell this?
No, I meant more as like, and I think that's, that the primary thing is here that climate research is completely disconnected from benthic research, not completely, right? Of course, we've seen like there's efforts to do that, but it's not moving at the same pace. And there's all these different coastal communities like Blue Carbon Community, Nature-Based Solution that's doing some research that hasn't been connected to how these things are moving, right? So there's challenges at every step of the way here on like the connecting side. And I think this is, I don't know, you put it yourself as a call to arms to like, how do we do this connection and how do we justify, because truth be told, every time you're thinking about doing something that's like new in this space, it's really hard to find who's gonna pick that up.
Exactly. I think framework or like introduction, we have a list of challenges, doing another list of broader picture and scenarios. To me, it sounds a little redundant or like a little throwing people off, but we can use the framework as opportunity to call for coordination, call for how we work together, right? We should propose a way of working together in promoting bentho processes in bigger modeling space. And once we have that framework of working together, then we list the challenges of how we do it. How we do it, and then what we need to do.
Yeah, the other thing I would say too is that we keep saying challenges, but it might be better, this might be that
Opportunity.
yeah, really to focus on this as an opportunity, because the challenges just sound like, we've got challenges, right? But instead, it's like we have this opportunity. Oh, look, these models are being made, but we care about the benthos. We can put this in here. Or it's really hard to measure these things, but we're coming up with these low tech or low cost sensors to do this, or high cost, but like new ways to do things, right? So I think constantly framing it as like a can-do positive thing is going to be a better sell.
So maybe the challenge is the introduction.
Or just motivations, right? Like here we have this neat opportunity. We spend a lot of time on water column. That's great. But it turns out the benefits are also super important. And they're important for X, Y, and Z. And now we've come together and we're gonna, this is what we need to do to help connect these two communities.
What you said about the audience, and going back to the audience is resonating, because the other audience that I would really like this paper to speak to are funding agencies. So that they fund, like, so that they fund long-term monitoring programs, or just even maybe multi-seasonal. Can we just start with 1 year? Can you please fund me to go out 4 times a year to the same study site?
You only need to measure like once every day. Like 2 cores, it's fine.
So
And then you get those 2 decades that you sampled in different places, that you're really on the progression.
Yeah, so I'd really like us to also think about practically, like, hopefully this is something, once it's written, if it's high impact, we just send to our funding agencies.
Or you- I
And
think we
our reviewers of our proposal.
Right.
Seriously, because, otherwise, we're not gonna get
No, and I
funded
think
for
that
this.
that's it, because when you try to do something like this, it's really hard to like, especially connecting like land to ocean and all that kind of stuff. It's like, well, some people will fund the ocean, some people will fund the land, and there's these spaces that are kind of left there that's really hard to make this argument.
Or innocent.
I mean, if we, sorry, if anybody.
Kanchan, did you have something to say? Someone had a hand up, I thought.
Now I'm just scratching my head.
Dalton?
Regarding this, measurement, what I'm thinking is like, if, like, not every researcher wants to follow something that a different group set, like, you will not do that, right? You're not like, look at a paper and people say, you should do this, you should like go to this region and sample this area like this. That's unrealistic, it will not happen. But maybe we get one point at some areas and say, hey guys, can you get data at this point? Can you like expand your sampling size to this one point, because this would be like good for the entire community, because then we would have like some more effort on doing something that's not necessarily prohibited and exhaustive, but it would allow us to have more frequent data at least in one point or like 2 points.
Are you talking about like a model system?
No,
Sorry,
no,
not
no,
model, like an
no.
exemplary system that we all interested in, and then, we all share our data, share our efforts in studying
maybe
like
I'm
one
talking
system.
About having like one site or a few points of interest that like could be proposed as sites of interest, where like different researchers could like just go there and make some sampling if they are having research at this area. Because then you would not like constrain these guys to do only what we are proposing, but we will nudge them towards that.
Yeah. I think that's a nice addition to our like challenge,
Locations,
yeah,
I think that goes with the long-term monitoring
locations of common interest, yeah.
effort. That,
Yeah, I've been thinking about this sort of new framework that was proposed. I hear it could fit well as an introduction. I hear broad and blurry. And like broad and blurry is literally what we're trying to do with a model, right? Talk about a 1 degree grid cell. That is literally broad and blurry, right? So like, how do we, I like this framework that's been laid out, and I fully understand your point. But like, I think we need to start broad and blurry and then kind of work in the process-based stuff somehow. And I don't know how to do that, but I think this larger framework is a good place to start. I don't know. I was trying to think it through.
well, lucky for us, I think Sam already wrote the paper. So do we need to revisit the structure? Because what we have here, introduction, review of processes. So introduction, we're not gonna review all the processes, I assume.
No, oh, well.
Anyone's gonna review all the processes in roughly 200 words?
All of this.
Yeah.
References.
Introduction and motivation.
I still would argue we really haven't fully defined what the goal of this paper is. We sort of have sort of wandered around and we sort of do a random walk and we sort of go in this direction and then we head over here and then somebody says, no, we need to be over here. So we go back over here and then we wander again and that's probably a great thing for a discussion like this. I agree, but at some point we're gonna have to really say, what's our goal?
Yeah, no.
I mean, I was thinking about with stakeholders, we're not writing this for stakeholders, I would argue, but we are writing it for scientists I would argue, writing it for scientists to tell them to talk to stakeholders.
Right.
That's where I would envision stakeholders come in.
Yeah,
For example.
I think part of why, like I keep bringing up the stakeholders, like who's gonna use this, right? So just thinking of like the research that we want to get funded, and I'm with Shirley here that we should write this, for funding agencies, like this is important, you should pay attention to this. And really what's gonna happen, at least trying to work on like more coastal modeling, is that it's like you have to have a stakeholder to get your stuff funded. Because there's an end goal, like all the research, and maybe this is the time to make a point that not everything needs to be for a stakeholder. Right, like that we need the basic science before, because a lot of it is like, well, give me now, how am I gonna monitor this thing? And I don't know, like, we're not there yet, right? Like, so that's something that I have had to do.
We're not laughing, we're not laughing, we're laughing. What-
I'm just trying to be funny, I'm trying to.
No, I think it's great, I think that's exactly, that kind of stuff is what I would argue we need, let's just be bold, provocative. I mean,
Okay,
I
yeah.
sort of think about what Lisa brought up earlier, that you go to a I'm not gonna keep feeding on geotraces just because it's so entertaining. That you go to these meetings and they talk about benthos, and then when the final document comes out, it's, how many water column stations are we gonna go to? And the benthos is sort of in a footnote. And so this is a chance to put the benthos in the top and say, oh yeah, we got some time, maybe we'll collect some water.
Bottom water only.
Yeah, all bottom, hey, bottom box.
Yeah, can we at least make it very close to the
Yeah, very close to the bottom.
But I think
You're absolutely right.
Audience, like, okay, funding agencies, but I think we also want, I mean, there seems like three things are coming up. We want funding agencies to read it. We want modelers to approach observationalists and observationalists to approach modelers to work together. And who said it, like better handshakes between the two. As I think would be my goals.
So I'm gonna start on this side and then move, so Colleen, Heidi, Subadi, Lisa.
So I've been trying to synthesize the many places this discussion has gone, and I still think our original objective, that mismatch between process-based observation and our system model needs, is what I am hearing, and that it is not about listing the problems, but it is identifying the problems that have potential solutions that we have identified, and that will make the biggest leaps or the fastest leaps. Right? Yeah, like this has to have action items.
Yeah.
I'm wondering in terms of audience, when we talk about observationalists and modelers, are we talking about benthic observationalists and modelers, or also targeting communities that don't already think about benthos? Because one thing that makes seem very simple is like defining what we mean by benthic data and like where the cutoff for that is, because like when this has been a super interesting meeting for me because I don't think about sediments as much, and lots of people do, which is great. And in a coastal environments, they're usually like vegetated or reefs or these other environments. And one of our big major issues in terms of chemistry in those areas is that we just don't know what's there. Which is not necessarily the same. I mean, I guess it is kind of a question for a deeper ocean, but we're not in like probably more. Deep ocean. I think there are different like scales of questions there too. And from the perspective of like water column chemistry and people collecting, like maybe not sampling deep enough and taking a bunch of surface samples, I think just having a tiny amount, like bit of real estate dedicated to like, well, why? What is this and why is it important? Like, we're talking about that in a more specific way, I think, but I think it's worth thinking of like oversimplifying that.
I'm used to Cronenberg's too, benthic and sediment, so I think there's a lot of people that are just gaining momentum, right? So with making it broader to the broader oceanographic community, coastal resilience community, and
I think one of the things that we can, put forward as an opportunity is to, like, effort to create a database of observational data that we already have. Like, I think in some of the discussions we were going through that, there is a lot of data available in different groups inside your lab, or which are not published or published, but in like, in smaller papers. But we don't have a global database kind of thing, or maybe we have for benthic processes. Like, for water column, we have a lot of like World Ocean Atlas kind of database where you go there, you have a kind of data kind of thing. But we don't have those things for benthic processes in many cases. So if we can argue that we can, creating an open access database of benthic processes or like benthic measurements where we can add to whenever we publish a paper, then that database will grow and that will be like available to modelers. They can just go there and, mine the data that we need in different places. So that kind of opportunity we can, put forward to this paper. And also like, defining the units, suggest like the standardized unit that we can like all use for that kind of. That was
I agree, and I was wondering if to add to the list of the target audience for, I mean, one target is scientists who are planning projects or maybe trying to get them funded, but I wonder if we can also target scientists who are already have projects funded or already have ongoing work, but really want to contribute. Like, I would say I'm one of these, and it would be really nice to have, like, we've talked about this a little bit, and I don't think it would be too much to have in this paper, but just a short little table of like, what are the key parameters that if you can, like, literally like no more than 5 or, but like oxygen,
Low-hanging fruit,
or
but
low-hanging fruit that is relatively easy to add onto it. And it's not even choosing new sites, it's just like in the sediment core that you've already collected. Like, I always just measure the trace metals, because for my questions, I just look at the manganese to determine if there's oxygen. So I literally never measure oxygen. But like, that's, if that's valuable to the community, then that's something I should know. Okay, I'm gonna tag, include that in my. That having that table would be really helpful. Yeah. And going back to Subhadeep's point, I mean, I am 100% with you that would be lovely, right, to have all of that. But in terms of like getting the data, I think just encouraging some common metadata and units, and that all the data gets published is already like a first step. Where to put all this data and how to, if we should have one place to add all the data to, I think that's a out of the scope of this.
Is there one that already
Because
exists
that's
that
a
we could
huge
suggest?
discussion.
Well, for better or worse, there's Bicodemo.
Yeah,
It's.
What's it?
Sure.
Bicodemo, yeah, which is NSF's. NSF supported, option, where's it, what's all, yeah.
They are.
But one thing, maybe following up on your point, setting up a server for data and metadata management is extremely expensive. But what we can do is, can people put a link to where their data is? That is not a difficult document to have. Like, okay, this is what I did, this is where the data is available at this web link. Most of us do submit data somewhere.
Yeah, because just say Bicodemo, and then you go there and you don't find it.
Like, it's the data link for where the data is would be really helpful for somebody. It's like, because Googling up doesn't show up.
Or searching Bicodemo.
Doesn't show up, yeah.
That's why I said for better or worse.
Yeah.
But just come back to what you had said earlier about, one of the things that's really gonna be important is to make sure we figure out what's out there and what's been done. And so in terms of databases, I know that for carbon, for example, Tim Eglinton's group has been putting together a global repository of sediment carbon data and radiocarbon measurements, I think. And so I think we need to figure out where else. I mean, again, there's the Jorgensen's paper with, 10,000 oxygen flux measurements from all over the world. We need to sort of, I would argue, do as good a job as we can to just get that information and put it in, whether it's in a table or an appendix to this paper, as a starting point to sort of, so we're not just,
I really.
you don't want to sound stupid and say, we need to do blah, 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 blah. And then some reviewer says, well, you ought to do your homework first because it's all here already.
Mhm.
I got a really crazy idea. What if we do two papers? One with the big overview of, sort of the big broad scope, what's the big problem? Why are you guys worried about it? And then another paper that goes into specifics about what are the specific challenges and what are the solutions to those problems. Then you get 2 for 1. And they could be, they could be companion papers or they could be independently like that easy.
I mean, if they're that connected, why separate into two? We have the.
Because of the page limitation.
Limit.
And I don't know. Like I said, it was a crazy idea.
Gotta get the first one going first.
Yeah. I think that we might end up there, but we should, I mean, it's 10:22. We should start trying to bring the discussion back. To see how many papers.
What if we break for coffee, have some time to think about it, and then come back
Okay,
to try to.
do people want to take 10 minutes? Is that enough?
Sure.
I'm worried about time.
Okay.
10 minutes, even 5. Even 5.
Thank you, y'all, for reaching out.
10 minutes.
I have other, I had the Fido Ninjas. Change all that. For the Final Fantasy.
Overwhelmed.
Yeah, that was really thinking about the structural stuff here, company structure.
Yeah.
Now we have stuff here, the timing around it, then hold on, it's from our members.
This idea of structural issue with traditional.
Yeah,
Just they want in the context.
Story goes.
Great big things.
So I had to come up with all sorts of little crap. So it looks like I'm just able to.
No, and he tried his best to give us the space, but we couldn't really.
Yeah,
Connect.
there's a little disconnect there.
Everything.
And I think the problem with that, especially thinking about our audience of other scientists, other
Football.
funding agencies.
Golf and baseball.
We need the geotraces, the core that doesn't focus on water column measurements and bring this scope to people and people that are doing biology and bioinformation. You can't do with the CPD-based sampling, right? That's why it didn't.
My wife
work.
is a scientist.
Is because it was still based on CPD, figuring out the iron flux. But if we bring the actual mechanism of people that are not working in water column, that are actually working.
No,
Now we can bring
it,
in all these other.
it is,
components
but you have to go online.
European groups, right?
Yeah.
And if we think about the audience,
You could spend
agencies and other
all your
scientists.
time talking about.
It's like you cannot just throw us in there as
Yeah.
a side piece.
We need
That's not gonna
our
fly.
own thing that is functionally different to enable the measurements that we need. which we
And we both do the same
can't
thing, we both have the same process, and we know the same way.
I think that is something.
Really easy to go to get obsessed with an issue.
Traction.
She's much better at
I mean, that was so highlighted in that house.
separating, putting partitions.
Exactly.
As
As I was saying, that was just like, I need personally a brother, like, because I'm like, I can't, I don't fit this, there's nothing for me.
Yeah.
And I feel like.
Well, for her,
a lot of
it keeps her
other
awake. If she, reads a troubling email at 8 o'clock, then she can't.
How do we make the importance to it?
So when you set it off at 5, at least they get a little bit of time to.
And,
do the present.
that's the structural.
Yeah.
You give her 30 minutes, I can sit at 29, tell you that.
But, I can compensate.
She worries about.
Okay.
But like, what we need to do is.
Yes. Are you gonna give that as a comment?
You know what, I wanted to discuss that because we're purposefully
Go back to some.
not talking about places in the water column or in the sediment. We're doing, it's a very process-based science plan, because we want to be inclusive of all areas of the ocean. Because.
So if they're feeling excluded, that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not quite.
If you look at the geotrace science plan, they specifically hone in on sediment water interactions.
That's
And I don't see any opportunity for them to fix that in their science plan. Because there's no, it's not included in any of the sediment messages.
So there needs to be like a bent those.
So the framework that was shown, if it has been operating.
That's people.
Get what we need to make.
Yeah, I want to connect with Lisa about that and let her know that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't need to be law, right?
Yeah.
That's a thing with us.
It was like sleeping.
I know, I did see that. And I'm not
Did you get to connect with all your family last night?
Not much.
On the.
You earned a birthday now.
Hang out this weekend.
My mom's cousins have started this, where whoever's birthday it is, they get to choose where they, they're like city people, where they go. I'll let the person paid for it.
Oh, that's nice.
Or like the birthday person just gets to make all the little thing. All that sort of stuff.
But that's one.
But they do.
Second is that somebody is.
I live my son college,
There you go.
which I feel like I've done learning for sure. There's been lots of.
If we're gonna say other stuff, if we're gonna bring this to an example model, we need it. So I
I
think
know
figure out
this
my
is
color.
It's really, really hard
Switch
to-
these two. I would do
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
I don't understand why.
No, they're all hard. I leave with my elbow on mine.
Base.
I almost took that out. Oh, no, that shit. So I use my, like,
Yeah.
I hold the bottom. so
Yeah,
I
and that's
just
three.
push it.
Yeah.
Right?
That's-
But no, it's just, it's a very
That's gonna fall apart, so it's lack consensus with the ones.
And it doesn't make a big enough
Well,
call.
we don't have any consensus right now, so.
I'm just looking for, for example, when you
So-
use a process, you do that. Let's say it's a whole cycle, right?
I just bought water off the ocean.
Because the one thing we're not, like, now we're talking for one cup, field traces. Like, there's the land motion provision, so that could be.
But mine was perfect.
Yeah.
That's
That's,
really
that's,
bad.
that's the initial.
Yeah, do it. Otherwise, we'll waste the opportunity.
Mechanized law. It's actually.
Yeah.
Motivation. There's a segment research.
Oh, boy.
Right, the models. Doing it well, it's not, that's the big picture, right? It's like, there's all these things that are, but that's not like, or the deficit of that. That's not being considered enough times. Traditional oceanographic research has not stayed. And we need a new framework. Now moving on to range.
Oh, my goodness.
Favorite differences. And combining the relationships between variables that have. Then I've almost really read it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You know what I would just, why I would put those together is because if you don't have one and you got it, so like some of this about parameterization, right? You have oxygen everywhere. Can that tell you something about some other variable that you don't have? So that, yeah.
Sorry, I will let you respond to get it to water.
So that's what, the data and, relationship between variables. Second, mesocosm and, model, observation, iterations to for process understanding.
Here, you wanna take two?
Third, geospatial with that,
I got plenty, you want a clean water instance?
yeah.
So mine.
How about a clean water instance?
Third, a geotraces large scale equivalent
Certainly.
that's not,
All the king of
having
stitches, man.
sediments and things.
Oh, my Lord.
There you go.
Look at you.
Something not based on.
Yeah.
So we're, we need
That's
now,
support.
the
Some
fourth.
people do it electronically. but I'm still like,
Self-management, motion connection also, and that's, where I'm less clear on the actual.
Because of the same type of geometry.
Certainly. Then you have a mascot.
That would be even easier, right?
Well, and you know, he this year, but.
You could do this on a whiteboard.
Da Vinci's notes are very popular.
Yeah.
But, you know, starting here and then
Everyone's
taking that
gonna
next
need to-
step, and we can argue about whether that's coastal or whether that's.
Yeah,
deep,
they have
or
it, that's what's
cruise
up
track
there.
that has 3 points.
Literature,
It starts
all the
with what's
models.
gonna be
Yeah.
the shell. There's another perspective. Yes.
This is a project in my undergrad. To go to the local lake once a week and do water following.
Oh, yeah.
It's all.
Yeah. So this is what I want to say for tonight's.
Yeah, well, they've been doing it for about 3 years. You know, undergrad.
Yeah. Yes.
In the summertime, then it's.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, model comparison.
Great way.
Verging on
I
the
have
same
a ton of
thing.
undergrads. So I sent this project, they basically run it. And the senior ones teach the junior ones how to collect the samples.
Are they doing each other? Yeah.
No, they're sampling off of,
And then
Floating
whatever,
dock goes on into.
they're
like-
falling behind this, so that's.
So-
We don't actually have to say how, we can just say we call
They
for.
gotta take all the toys with them, and, I mean, it's like, the best of is literally the quality sign, I mean,
Yeah,
whether
right.
it's, you know.
Or it's-
The 1% of the.
Then those rule the world.
That's where all the government is from,
So now we just get.
It's a
One
great way.
has, one has.
A lot of students.
So we laid it out and then we did it last time.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. Do you want to just, I see,
All right.
I can
There's
write
like,
it
there's
up.
so much of it.
No, I'm just gonna start. No, yeah, I'm sure you guys had a workshop this year, I guess, and you were, have, our artistic design. Yeah.
What's the theme of the paragraph? Wonders, at least look here, that structural problem was out of the geography as it relates.
Both areas doesn't have to be tied, but we're something happening, but hey, what's structure?
You know, it's amazing, I've had this problem for like a decade working at
So,
home, where I just don't.
here are
think
the
it-
adjustment session.
Like, I think I just figured out why.
Yeah.
Because I literally can't work to just eat the next guy.
Time and space, yeah, coastal.
So she's been, I mean, she's a part of sharing.
We're gonna have to edit it, 'cause I don't know about added, like,
She's been doing virtually, but she loves to come up with this.
And we do this. It's a lot of fun. It was like 5 years prior to COVID. That started like,
Be like high up.
Yeah.
You should have a preparation plan that is different from hurricane. Like they. That's what I don't
Well, she's on.
Yeah.
Better. And then just draw
Different
down
half,
to it.
yeah. Like I,
From scratch.
I don't know, I feel like. Just.
Over that, like that.
Well, I used to first start out, like, I really use this document.
I just put it on.
Oh, okay. So like, yeah, that one's getting a little chaotic. Yeah. And then.
It's about the right time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, the same kind of thing where you got like, put up a big tent, that's the other, so full breakfast, I would lunch.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody gets that time to interact. That's the
Oh,
one. The one in,
Been impressed.
or not, not Brookline, I don't think, the one, oh, on Boylston Street here in Boston. Oh. This is like,
The thing that I would
it
change.
is such a change for me because you walk in and you get in line and you basically go through the store
You know.
in line and you know, while you're standing, people just set down their basket and they like kick it and then they walk forward. Very fancy way. Kick it,
Well,
yeah.
and
It's kind of funny, but yeah, very different than the mega store, yeah, yeah.
And that's good. And it's.
And I'm like.
This, I think you can prepare it. Can't get through it. It's creative people. Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, yeah, and you might be able to do that in a small scale setting. Yeah. That's where.
It's gonna be a surprise.
Regional small scale setting would be very useful.
Do you want some help, like writing or? do you want me to
saying that.
I'm like really lost already.
Actually couple like the.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
okay,
I think I'm gonna do that.
I can work on the document, and also
I call that.
like.
All.
All the way up to the point.
Yeah, I think.
The journal, it's not really has.
I mean, there are probably ways to do it, but, set of we've recently spent this amount of sediment once a year. And then you just calculate. And you can just get a unit, get approximately the same units.
Or,
Get a slight-
progress.
It's also constrained by anything except.
I don't know if the.
I want bigger flat.
That's the.
More frequently or to a greater depth. So. Another perfect. Yeah. I mean, there's two papers, we wrote two papers in the last couple of years. One was in marine chemical. Chemical copy, but it's all handwritten.
I can't write the one.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, the date, there's a higher seat.
Yeah, that's why I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she's asking you to screw away.
My best guess.
Yeah, I'm creating good rewriting document together, because I just copied what I wrote down, I said, work on my copy.
Oh.
I'm working online.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that wild? So it's like going out and get more light.
Okay.
Like I have the plant that kind of like a vibe, so I was like, I'm just.
I think we covered it last
following
year.
through. But like, watch the.
Jim was trying to talk, like, you're allowed to be more involved in
That's
that
nuts.
and stuff, so we like kept like.
All right, so we're gonna go,
Tracks, because there's a window right
we
here. So I
had
think
some
it's like going
ideas
down, like trying to get
how we
light.
structured it. Can I scroll up, back up? Yeah, okay.
Now I want to just like.
So how about this first structure? So for main points, we call for data synthesis, exploring key relationships between process rates and measurements and variables. So basically putting it together and seeing what are some of relationships that we can use from the data that we have. So we can, that could help us fill in some of the gaps that we need for large scale variables. Some model intercomparison so that we can get to some of the sensitivities and what do we need for, different applications. New observations, lab experiments, metacosms, so testing key hypotheses and highlight observations by doing that iteration from the lab experiment modeling observation. So that little loop that came up a lot. And then I think one of the main things here is that benthic observations does not really fit very well with the traditional oceanographic approaches of just doing the water column research. So we need something that's specific, a geotraces type project focused on benthos that would bridge between the shallower, deeper areas.
While we're throwing acronyms out there, I'm wondering if, I'm thinking about like some of the ridge programs where they've got these cabled observatories. Again, coming back to the idea that sediments don't move and we need to go out there for longer periods of time. But to do some of these observations, as we were talking about at breakfast with some of us, you know, instruments take power. And so cabled observatories, that approach may be relevant to studies like this.
Yeah, like the idea of ocean infrastructure for benthic
Yeah,
observations.
yeah, exactly, exactly, yeah.
We fucking spell infrastructure.
Close enough.
The Oregon ocean system already has a node at 200 meters and one at 1,000 meters. That sort of sip and take temperature, some of the oxygen data and some velocities, which I've used before, which are kind of helpful. Plug to those.
We have somebody online.
Alex?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was just thinking about like a general kind of thread throughout this paper. I think this group is really unique and it's important to get that across. When we have such a big group and everybody wants like very specific things to help their research, of course, those are very important. Unfortunately, we can't fit them all in at the same time. I was just thinking about like a kind of like a funnel framework going from making the argument of how the benthic component needs to be integrated into the models that we already have, which we've all been advocating for. That it's the reason that we're here. Kind of speaking to the larger scale of what already exists and why there is this gap of the benthic data, and then zooming into the fact that modelers and benthic observationalists are talking to each other directly to generate these targeted projects, which can make it easier to make your own niche for funding and generate more targeted focused projects, I guess. And then in that section, that would include what is specifically needed, like a table, like people have suggested already, of specifically needed from both sides to kind of strengthen the use of both of those sides of data, and then zooming out more into how the need for benthic data can be incorporated into existing programs, like how people who are already collecting sediment cores can generate more widely used data, even if it's just collecting one vial of nutrients, like was already mentioned. And then when speaking about how the benthic component can be integrated into what already exists, maybe that section then broadens out into the fact that maybe the way we do things for other parts of oceanography don't really work for the benthos, and that it's critical but very unique, and maybe we need to rethink, like the last section you guys were already talking about, rethink the way we approach those observations, to kind of drive home that like there is a need for the way things are done now to include the benthic component, but also a chance for kind of a shift in the way we do these kind of measurements. But inside of each of those, like the specifics of everything that was already listed here, if only we could list all the variables that we want to collect, of course, but yeah, just a thought.
The table with and adding what are some low-hanging fruit that people can collect on cruises versus what the modelers want. I think that that's definitely something we should include.
Yeah, that fits into data synthesis.
Yeah.
Maybe not synthesis.
Yeah, coming back to what Matt was saying about cruises, like where you put something, you deploy something and then not have long enough to like leave it in the water or the cruises so you can come back. So typically, like, these cruises are cruise tracks that start in one place and end in another. How often do, and I don't know, because I don't do a lot of seagoing science, but how often do, like, are there tracks that come back to the same spot, or like, just thinking about the structure of scientific cruises in a way where you could deploy things to do benthic measurements earlier in a cruise track and then return. I don't know.
Bats and hots.
For deep sea, that depends a lot on the projects. I'm not sure how it's in the US, but in the UK it's a lot, it depends a lot on the project and the fundings. And unless you, like, the university or the research center has a specific observatory in that area, it's very difficult to go back to the same place over the years, just because you lack fundings, for example.
Well, I was thinking not even over the year, but like over the same cruise. Like, is there a way to redesign some of, like, a subset of cruises to do return to some of the same places? Like, I did a short cruise thing in grad school early on that ended up not really working at all because I was trying to do gradient fluxes on reefs, but we would have an opportunity to deploy something, and then the people in charge of the cruise were like, oh, you gotta get it, you gotta pick it up, and it was like 3 days later. And they're like, you gotta pick it up or else it's like, we're never picking it up again. And so like none of that data works.
That's like the problem with
Yeah,
traditional oceanography, right?
Exactly.
There's a reason I work at the coast and not in the. Right,
Yeah.
because there's structural impediments for me working in the deep ocean, and it's not because it's deep, it's because the infrastructure, whether that's ships, nodes. How do we get the benthic measurements to the deep ocean? And
And
that's just something we don't do very well.
it's a huge task and undertaking, but I think it is worth like pointing that out and being
Yeah.
like, the structure for doing oceanic research.
So
does
we're
not
all in
support this
agreement.
at all.
Well, but I think that's really just a question, in some cases of, writing proposals and getting funded.
That's what I was gonna say, yeah.
Because back in the, I'll show my age, back in the 80s, there was a program called the MANOP program, which stood for manganese nodules, something. And they chose 4 or 5 stations, in the deep ocean. I mean, these were 5,000 meter stations, and they went out there, they drove the boat out there, and they sat there and did, state of the art benthic science. And they went back to those stations, I don't know, 3, 4, or 5 times over the course of several years. So I think, again, anything is doable if you propose it well, and the funding agencies want to give you the money.
Yeah, and if you're the chief scientist, you can make those.
Yeah.
Like, if that's the priority of the vessel, then the water column people are the ones that are tacked on and have to figure out how to
Yeah.
match.
On my
But
cruise,
that's the
water column people are,
We need a revolt.
they
from
do what I
the
want to do.
Oceanographers.
There's a comment online.
Yep, Lisa says, suggest that long-term pelagic monitoring programs like Cal Coffee incorporate seafloor stations to build bentho-pelagic coupling. And also could co-locate open ocean benthic studies with permanent moorings that measure ocean variables in the water column, such as ocean sites.
I think that would fit with the 4th point. And then we had as the introduction, some review of why the benthos are important, ultimate fate of carbon storage in the ocean, some linking with the climate and, how we need to, why we would need to include that. And a few sentences describing why not. I
So
think,
these, sorry,
go ahead.
question, these main points is replacing our list of challenges and opportunities, or this is just introduction?
No, this is the challenges, opportunities.
Opportunities,
Opportunity.
okay,
Let's call it opportunities.
okay.
People like to
Yeah,
support opportunities.
I love positivity.
I think the one thing that I would like to know where it goes here, because that's definitely something that we should include is the extreme events. And I think it can fit somewhere in the framework we already have.
It might come in the language.
Extreme events.
Like if we suggest someplace for long-term monitoring, that someplace that's affected could be.
I would say new observations maybe.
We think our hotspots
Mhm.
for this sort of protection and have some delegate and study.
That was Delta's point on common locations of interest, right? And that could include extreme events, some boring places that we didn't monitor.
I was advised not to call it boring. But yeah, some
Baseline scenario.
baseline,
dynamic.
less dynamic. Okay, so we can add that as the. So now the next thing is we need some champions for the different sections. Everybody's welcome to contribute. This will be available for everyone throughout the whole process. But it would be good to identify some people to take charge of the different sections. Colleen?
Yeah, I just wanna say kind of what we're thinking here, so you will. Maybe agree to be in a certain section to write that section. We need leads for that section. I think we were thinking one early career, one not early career. And the leads will be tasked with organizing meeting for that section at least once per month. And making sure that progress is made on that section.
Thank you. Two things that, we have a rough, like, how long we want each section to be roughly and a timeline.
So timeline, I am pretty confident we can get this done by end of summer, say. Okay, we have all the ideas are here, we need to do some reading and some writing, but I think sooner is better while things are fresh in our minds. What was the other question?
Roughly, like how many words we aim for each section.
So that I think depends on what journal we land on. And just to,
Weren't a lot of them 2,000 words?
yeah, a lot of them are 2,000 words. I think biogeosciences was pointed as one that's a little longer, so maybe that's the start. Because 2,000
words max?
Huh?
I guess I wouldn't worry about word length right now.
Yeah.
It's better to have too many words,
Yep.
and cut it out than to sort of spend too much time.
Yeah,
on
I
it.
guess we still want like 4 pages.
Well,
right?
yeah, with
That's
it, you know, if the goal is 2,000, 2 to 3,000 words in total, then people writing different sections should scale it appropriately.
Can I just ask a clarifying question about the last two? So we have new observations and then land to ocean continuum / geotraces for benthos. And it seems to me like, and then there's a bunch about how traditional oceanography doesn't work for benthic. That's stuff seems to kind of go in the new observations section.
So I think the way we were thinking about the new observations is to like that short loop on the lab observation modeling. So just like the process.
Experimental in there, like. new
Oh,
experimental, because it's like.
New experiments, maybe?
So,
Mhm.
I was afraid of that.
Yeah, lab and mesoplasm experiment.
Oh, okay.
So like the title should be the whole thing, right? This section is about the cycle. Right?
Yeah, and then
Cycle,
one on
okay, I
like,
guess when I see observation in that one, I think like
yeah, no, that's,
observations in the ocean, but okay, that makes sense.